Video game industry is a fucked up place for sure. It's unpredictable and nobody's truly safe. It's like a roller coaster that only goes up and only God knows when it might drop. Now, because the gaming world can be so cutthroat, even the big name studios can vanish into thin air before you even know it. To dodge the bullet, these studios are always on their toes, pushing the envelope with fresh ideas and top-notch production to shine in packed arena. But sometimes, biting off more than they can chew lands them in hot water. Also not keeping up with the fast-paced changes in the industry, not fully grasping the hardware side of the gaming platforms they are working on, or just plain old mismanagement can tank any of the most legendary studios. So let's take a stroll down memory lane and spotlight some of these iconic studios that crafted unforgettable games but are now just a part of the gaming history, and the very games that tip them over the edge. Silicon Knights once a big shot in the gaming world, known for hits like Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes and Eternal Darkness. They had this grand plan for a game called Two Human back in 1999, but technical limitations made them hit pause on that dream. But while teamed up with Nintendo, they cooked up MGS Twin Snakes and Eternal Darkness for GameCube. They even thought about bringing Two Human to the GameCube, but it was too big of a bite to console to chew, so they had to scrap it. While Silicon Knights worked closely with Nintendo, it was like being a part of a family, and they got a sneak peek at a prototype which eventually became the Nintendo Wii. But Wii, being the underdog of the 7th-gen consoles when it comes to the raw power, didn't have the technical muscle for Two Human like PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360. So Silicon Knights and Nintendo went their separate ways. And Silicon Knights teamed up with Microsoft to make Two Human an Xbox 360 exclusive. They even chose Unreal Engine 3 from Epic Games for its development.
You said it yourself. I'm not your friend. Find someone stronger, so I did.
What do you want me to say, huh? I care about you, cause goddammit. What is that?
And the hype train for Two Human was full steam ahead, with Silicon Knights head Dennis Dyack comparing it with big names like Zelda. But when the demo dropped, it was a bumpy ride with frame rate dips and texture issues. Plus Dennis Dyack jumping into online beefs with fans didn't help smooth things over. So Silicon Knights was feeling the heat, but they decided to do something bizarre by taking Epic Games to court. They claimed that Epic gave them a half-baked engine, which messed up the Two Human demo. They also threw some serious shade at Epic, accusing them of keeping the Unreal Engine documentation under wraps to cut down the competition and make their own titles like Gears of War look better. They even accused Epic of using cash from other devs who licensed Unreal Engine to bankroll Gears of War's development. However, due to all these hiccups, Silicon Knights had to ditch Unreal and whip up their own engine to continue the development of Two Human. But man, after a dozen years of big talk and massive marketing campaign, Two Human finally dropped, and let's just say it wasn't the hit everyone was hoping for. It got slammed for glitchy gameplay, missing the cool features they promised like co-op mods and graphics that were kinda last gen. Meanwhile, Epic clapped back with a lawsuit of their own, showing that Silicon Knights knew what they were getting into with Unreal's limitations, and that lawsuit started leaning in Epic's favor. Then the worst thing of all, remember how Silicon Knights switched to their own engine? Well, that's a whole other big ass lie.
That is one big pile of shit.
So Silicon Knights weren't exactly playing by the rule. They took the Unreal Engine and tweaked it way beyond what was cool with the Epic Games, which was a huge no-no according to their licensing agreement. Only Epic Games had the green light to modify it, but when the code for Two Human was checked out, it was clear as day bits of Epic's own code were in there. So Silicon Knights caught red-handed, and Epic Games didn't take kindly to that, and hit Silicon Knights with a whopping $4 million lawsuit under copyright infringement.
No. Wait.
And the final nail to the coffin was, the court ordered to destroy all those unsold Two Human copies. So Two Human got removed from the Xbox Online store as well. Well, that was a low blow to Silicon Knights' balls, and it felt really hard. They couldn't bear that kind of a hit to their bank account, and eventually they had to throw the towel and file for the bankruptcy.
You're dead, honey.
Back in 1995, DreamWorks SKG and Microsoft teamed up to create DreamWorks Interactive. Steven Spielberg himself was a key person in sealing the deal with Microsoft. But when DreamWorks decided gaming wasn't their jam, Electronic Arts stepped in, took over, and rebranded it as EA Los Angeles Studios. This move was a game changer for EA because it gave them the Medal of Honor series under their belt. And later, the studio got another rebranding as Danger Clause Games in 2010. Now about that name, Danger Clause, there's a little fun fact. The new studio head, along with two of his colleagues, came up with the name Danger Clause. So the name was inspired by a line from previous Medal of Honor game where one of the characters, Jim Patterson, yells out in game,
Danger close! We got danger close fire!
alright, this sounds cringy, but that's all for the fun fact.
Is that it?
Anyways, they were tasked to develop EA's Medal of Honor games. But after the World War military shooters started to lose their steam, Medal of Honor rival Call of Duty switched gears to modern shooters with Modern Warfare, and many studios started to replicate that success. Even Medal of Honor, as the series that pioneered FPS military shooters long before Call of Duty was even a thing, started to follow its footsteps by jumping into modern shooting games with the Medal of Honor reboot in 2010. It was decent, but didn't really shake up the super competitive shooter market. Then came Medal of Honor Warfighter, the follow-up to the 2010 reboot. Well, it faced several challenges. Even EA admitted there were some serious execution issues during the development, from shaky project management to technical hiccups. The team couldn't keep up, missing deadlines, and game lacked the innovation and the vision that once made Medal of Honor a household name.
That's very sad.
It was a tough chapter for a series that used to be at the top of its game. Then Medal of Honor Warfighter hit some technical difficulties that caused more stutters and demanded more PC specs than its competitors such as Call of Duty. And when it finally hit the shelves, the reviews were lukewarm at best, with Metacritic score hanging around the mid-50s. Players and critics alike called out the game for its short campaign, the story was described as lacking depth. Also, the weapons lineup that didn't really bring anything new to the table. So sales figures were also a bit of a facepalm moment for EA, not even close to what they were hoping for, especially when you look at the numbers from the 2010 Medal of Honor reboot. This rough patch put Medal of Honor series on ice, leaving Danger Close games out in the cold without a project. So eventually, the studio had to shut its doors. Some of the crew found a new home at DICE's LA studio, another branch of EA's family tree, known for the Battlefield and Mirror's Edge series and developing the Frostbite engine. But for most, it was time to pick up and move on to different studios within EA or somewhere else. It's bummer to see a studio that once led the charge with World War II shooters struggle to keep up in the super competitive shooter market.
Oh, that's tragic.
Bizarre Creations was a British game studio that started in 1988, really made waves with their racing games, like Metropolis Street Racer and Project Gotham Racing. They had a good run as a Microsoft first-party developer, but they were itching to create multi-platform games without limiting themselves just for one. So in 2007, they shifted gears and joined with Activision, aiming for a more stable future and the creative freedom they wanted. Activision was also eager to break into the racing genre, and the Bizarre put the pedal to the metal on a new title, Blur. Blur was way ahead of its time, and it was a big deal for Bizarre, since it was their first gig with Activision. But Blur's development road was bumpy, as despite Activision initially promised Bizarre the keys to the creative freedom, they started to butt in more and more, and Bizarre ended up losing the creative independence they used to enjoy. Eventually, they end up being Activision's bitch.
I own you. You're my bitch.
When Blur hit the streets, it got some high fives from the critics, but it didn't really rev up the sales engine, and it was up against Split Second, another combat racing game from BlackRock Studios. Even though both games had the unique mechanics, they targeted the same audience. And that year, big names like Gran Turismo 5 and Need for Speed Hot Pursuit also hit the streets, making it a tight race. So both Blur and Split Second didn't quite hit the sales margins their publishers were hoping for. But Bizarre had one more shot with a licensed 007 game. If they could make it a hit, they might just save the studio. With their racing game chops, Bizarre slipped some cool driving action into the third-person 007 Bloodstorm. At launch, it got props for its slick production, eye-catching visuals, and killer soundtrack, but it was also critiqued for its short length, story, and mission design that didn't quite hit the mark. However, the biggest challenge was that it was up against the GoldenEye remake, a modernized version of the classic 1997 game.
That doesn't look good. It isn't. It's him.
Also, Eurocom, the developer behind the remake, had a strong track record with 007 games, and the remake was eagerly awaited by the fans of the original. It dropped exclusively on Nintendo Wii, which was the hot console at the time, giving GoldenEye an edge over sales and popularity. Even though 007 Bloodstorm was a new take with its own story and gameplay, it kept getting compared to GoldenEye, because, well, they are both Bond games. Some fans thought Bloodstorm missed some of that Bond magic, plus nostalgia and popularity of GoldenEye, along with its Wii exclusivity, overshadowed Bloodstone, contributing to its lower sales and mixed reviews. Then the lackluster commercial success of both Blur and Bloodstone led Activision to seek a buyer for Bizarre Creations despite their talent and capabilities. But unfortunately, no one stepped up, and just a few months later, in February 2011, they had to close the doors for the studio for good. Actually, Bizarre Creations' story is a sad reminder that even the most talented studios with an impressive track record aren't guaranteed a secure future in the ever-competitive gaming industry.
You deserve better.
Free Radical Design. The British devs, famous for its Time Splitters series, and the hidden gem Second Sight, were eager to harness the power of 7th-gen consoles, like PS3 and Xbox 360. They came up with Haze, a shooter that delved into the dark side of war, where soldiers using a drug called Nectar which boosted their strength and durability, but blind to the grim reality of the war. This idea was way ahead of its time, kinda like what we later see in the games like Spec Ops: The Line. The team at Free Radical set out to develop Haze on a brand new engine, aiming to leave their outdated tech behind. They shook hands with Ubisoft, who was making waves in the industry back then. Haze was announced in 2006 for a 2007 release, so Haze had a tight deadline, especially since it was being developed on a new engine for a brand new console. However, originally planned for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC, Haze ended up as a PS3 exclusive, though the reasons behind this decision remain unclear. But it's speculated that the challenges of developing for multiple platforms on a tight schedule may have influenced this move. Early in its life cycle, the PS3 was considered the underdog of its generation, and Haze's exclusivity likely limited its sales potential. Plus, the PS3 was notorious for being a tough nut to crack for devs because of its unique cell-broadband architecture. It seems like Free Radical underestimated the complexity of developing a game alongside a new engine for a console like PS3, and they poured more time into engine's development than they bargained for. With the clock ticking, the actual game-making part of Haze lagged behind. By the time they figured things out, it was too late as they signed an agreement with Ubisoft to make a highly ambitious first-person shooter with a brand new in-house game engine with a tight schedule.
We are fucked!
Also, when Free Radical started to miss deadlines and show lack of progress, Ubisoft saw them as incompetent studio and started to intervene in the development. So Free Radical has to do whatever Ubisoft told them to do. However, with the reputation of Free Radical games, everyone had high hopes for their new game Haze. It was even hyped up as the next Halo killer by many. But as Bungie was gearing up to drop Halo 3, Free Radical was struggling to even get the basics of the game together. So Free Radical was not happy with what they come up with, considering their amazing track record and all of their games were well received. But when the time comes, they had to release Haze with mediocre visuals and undercooked gameplay mechanics that didn't quite hit the mark. So despite Free Radical's solid rep, the hype trend for Haze derailed pretty fast after it got hit with some rough reviews and sales figures that didn't do it any favors. Plus, it didn't help that it was released around the same time as the juggernaut Halo 3. Ubisoft eventually dropped any plans for Xbox 360 and PC ports as well. I mean, why would they port a game that didn't take off anyways, right?
True.
So the fallout from Haze's performance led Ubisoft to cut ties with Free Radical. Then Crytek stepped in, rebranding the studio as Crytek UK. But when Crytek hit a rough patch financially, Embracer Group, which owns Deep Silver, took over. And eventually, Free Radical Design was shut down, and the team was scattered, with many of the staff heading to Dambuster Studios, a division of Deep Silver. Actually, it's a bummer that a studio as talented as Free Radical isn't around anymore. If only they had more realistic goals and deadlines when they teamed up with Ubisoft, they might still be around making epic games today.
My time has come.
Radical Entertainment. The Canadian studio was the brains behind some killer games like Simpsons Hit and Run and Scarface The World Is Yours. They got scooped up by Vivendi Games in 2005, and when Vivendi merged with Activision, Radical came along for the ride in 2008. When the HD era is near, Radical got to work on a game called Prototype, their very own superhero game without any comic book strings attached. It starred Alex Mercer, a shapeshifter who could morph his body into a weapon. It was a bold move since no one else was really doing unlicensed superhero games at the time. They went to something big until they found out Sony was cooking up their own original superhero game, Infamous, with Sucker Punch, the folks who later brought us Ghost of Tsushima. both games looked the same from the surface, so Radical had to market their game to convince consumers to choose Prototype over Infamous. Both games were open-world action-adventure titles featuring superpowered protagonists in a city setting, which led to some inevitable comparisons, with players and critics often choosing one over the other, even though both games are significantly different superhero games with their own strengths and weaknesses. Anyways, Infamous hit the shelves first on May 26, 2009 in North America, and Prototype followed on June 9, 2009. Sony went all out on marketing Infamous, and it paid off with critical acclaim and popularity. Prototype was cool in its own right, but Infamous got a bit more love and even managed to spawn a couple of sequels and standalone DLCs. Prototype also had its moment as a bestseller, but its sales eventually slowed down. Possibly Infamous was hogging the spotlight. Still, Prototype did well enough for Activision to greenlight a sequel, but during Prototype 2's development, Activision cut over 200 jobs. So even though Radical Entertainment was behind Prototype 2, many of the original minds behind the first game had already left the building. As a result, in Prototype 2, Radical Entertainment took a bold step by introducing James Heller as the new lead, while Alex Mercer, the original protagonist, took a dark turn as the villain. This narrative shift divided the fan base, with action lovers digging the change. The rest, who became fans of Alex after playing a whole game with him, didn't like the change at all, echoing the divide seen in The Last of Us Part 2. However, at launch, Prototype got positive reviews for its entertaining gameplay and enhancements over the original, despite not everyone dug the story and repetitive nature of the game. But it was a hit out of the gate, as it was a top seller at the time of release. However, sales didn't keep up, and Activision wasn't thrilled. Prototype 2 also faced stiff competition from heavy hitters like Max Payne 3 and fellow Activision Blizzard game Diablo 3, which didn't help either.
Dude, I'm fucking famous.
And I'll make him infamous!
This sales slide led to downsizing at Radical Entertainment. In June 2012, Activision Blizzard announced that there will be no more original games from Radical, with few members sticking around to work on Destiny as a support team for Bungie. Activision pointed to the failure of Radical's Prototype IP to find a broad commercial audience as the reason for downsizing Radical to a support studio, making the end of an era for Radical Entertainment. Wrapping it up, Prototype 2 might have been a hit with the critics, but it didn't satisfy the big corporate assholes who focus more on the numbers on spreadsheets than on raw talent and potential. So it's clear that making a bad game isn't always what closes a studio's doors. Sometimes it's just a tough market, some technical hiccups, or the big publishers calling the shots. But these studios left the mark, giving us some awesome memories from our gaming days.
Do it anymore. I just try.
Respect.
So, what games have you played from these studios? And if you're digging this, let me know, and I might just make a part 2. Catch you in the next one.
I'll be seeing you again.